Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night. It is your host, the Horrorlander, and welcome to the Horrorweentown Festival, a place where all the attractions are horror media across all different ages. And I'm going to be showing you these attractions, telling you about them in terms of the stories, and why you should go ahead and check them out. Go along for the ride, for better or for worse, regarding your health. So today I'm going to be covering one personally kind of heartwarming to me, and that's because it's coming from my favorite horror author, which many of you guys watching already know about, or maybe you don't, is Tim Curran. He's my favorite horror author, and he has two Halloween stories out there. I wish he had more. Maybe in the future, or maybe God willing, I ever find any more of his non-reprinted short stories. But he's got two Halloween stories out there, and they bring the festive mood. It is October. I planned on doing spooky Halloween content. So without further ado, might as well enter through the gates, and let's go take a look at the first attraction. Welcome, folks.
Put your hands together, cover your eyes. Getting ready for a big surprise. Spirits in a bottle, ghosts in the machine. Walking on water, floating on a dream. Who's fooling who can you believe?
So the two Tim Curran short stories that are Halloween based that I'm talking about today are Pumpkin Witch and Spider Wasp. Pumpkin Witch is pretty much flat out just straight Halloween vibes, really representative of the holiday. And the other one, Spider Wasp, has a Halloween setting and atmosphere, but it's Lovecraftian based. So you get that type of twist in there. Now for Pumpkin Witch, I'm going to be doing a full spoiler review. I will talk about the climax and ending. Why is that? Because it comes from a book, I believe, called Shivers 4. It's the fourth one, which is a out of print, very rare paperback. A lot of you guys are probably not going to be able to access it, or maybe only a few of you will. That too, you have to pay up for it. So I'm just going to give you a full rundown of that story and talk about my thoughts on it. And Spider Wasp, I will be doing a kind of spoiler-free, relatively, where there's no climax or ending talk, because that story is available. It's in a book called Brain Leeches and Other Phenomena, which is a Lovecraftian short story collection by Curran, and it's out there to purchase or get your hands on. So that's pretty much going to be the setup. So without further ado, let me first go into Pumpkin Witch, and we'll end off the video with Spider Wasp. Our story of Pumpkin Witch opens up with a housewife who's decorating for Halloween at her house. You get a very nice atmosphere with, of course, the autumn leaves all across the suburbs, the chilly breeze. You have the fact that people have paper mache mummies hanging inside their windows, all types of decorations, scarecrows out front. So it's a very nice atmosphere setup. And she's in her kitchen basically carving out jack-o'-lanterns. She loves it. Halloween's her favorite holiday. This is one of her favorite hobbies to do. But unfortunately, she has a rough house life, and you find that out quickly because she has a verbally and physically abusive husband. That's right. He comes in and immediately starts, demoralizing her about why she's wasting time getting all these pumpkins and how he makes the money and how decorating is useless, even though she loves it and says she's getting ready for the kids who are going to come trick-or-treating. And when she makes a slight remark to him, he immediately ends up like slapping her, and there's a red mark on her face, and she gets so, angry, of course, justified, at him, calling him gutless and all these things. And he starts reeling back because usually she doesn't speak up to him. Usually she just kind of takes it. And you find out other things, like they were at a holiday party and she might have spoken back, and he beat her with like a hot, iron and stuff. So really bad stuff, really bad household life. And on top of that, when he's out at the office at work, she has to take care of his mother-in-law, who's pretty much like this hag, crone, really nasty woman that looks like a witch. She's always telling the lady how much of a terrible woman she is, how much her son deserves better, and she has to read her like children's stories like Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin or whatever, and take care of her in spite of all the insults and stuff. So her house life is just really, really bad. And the whole, mother-in-law thing kind of reminded me of Stephen King's story, Grandma, where in that story, the little kid character really dreaded going to the grandma's room. Here, she really dreads going to this old hag, mother-in-law's room. But something happens. And what happens is that for this main character, the lady, when her husband goes off to work and she has to take care of, the old crone, Halloween starts to kind of seep into her in a way and give her an opportunity to escape and kind of get comeuppance. And what that is, well, it gets quite crazy. Let's just put it at that. Lady ends up performing essentially a Halloween and All Hallows Eve seance. She ends up wearing all black. She sets up 30 of jack-o'-lanterns that she made and lit up all around her in the living room. And as she's sitting there sort of meditating, she's taking in these very vivid descriptions of autumn and Halloween and everything kind of going around the town. You expect it to kind of be like a meditation method. I don't really know if it was set up to be a seance, but it's more so like she's just meditating and kind of relaxing and really trying to enjoy and take in the holiday more than your average person, because it's sort of a way of escapism for her from her household life. You can interpret it as that. But she ends up slipping into a weird state. She ends up getting a very strange vision and almost gets taken to a pocket dimension, which is Halloween themed. And when she gets there, she sees this kind of empty prairie or cornfield, and there's all these hundreds and thousands of lit up jack-o'-lanterns, but they're not your normal jack-o'-lanterns. They got these, demonic grins carved in their faces, these diabolical looks. They look very malevolent. They're gathered around bonfires. They're set across the fields. They're hanging on top of fence posts. And as she starts to move forward, she sees these towers and arches and structures, not of jack-o'-lanterns anymore, but now of human bones. Kind of like 28 years later in Bone Temple. But this is way before those two movies came out. But that type of visual, those type of structures made out of bone and skulls and all these things. And she then ends up seeing these papier-mâché straw witches, thousands of them, kind of hung up on trees, almost like Salem witch trials kind of stuff. And she ends up seeing one particular one that looks like her mother-in-law. And she approaches it, and all of a sudden she realizes that her head is no longer there. She has a lit up jack-o'-lantern head, and she has, fingers made out of straw. As she gets to the paper witch of her old hag that she takes care of, she ends up basically tearing the stuffing out of her with this very evil urge inside of her that's building up. And then her hands light up on fire and she ends up burning that effigy. And as that happens, she looks into the distance and sees this giant, orange, glowing, bulbous, massive shape rising up and kind of coming to greet her. And it's not exactly Charlie Brown's Great Pumpkin. It's a little more devious than that. But that's when the vision cuts off and she ends up coming back to reality. And she sees, her jack-o'-lanterns there. She thinks she sees even more of them now. And she gets an idea. And she ends up going to the kitchen and ends up getting a jack-o'-lantern and heading up the stairs, going to the mother-in-law. And as the mother-in-law starts berating her, eventually this main character's had enough. And she picks up a kitchen knife and goes to carve a brand new jack-o'-lantern, except this time, not on a pumpkin, but on the woman herself. The husband ends up coming home from work, and as soon as he gets in, it's very dimly lit, it's dark, but he sees that there are hundreds, if not 1,000, lit up and carved jack-o'-lanterns set all throughout the house, flooding the house. And he's wondering to himself, how did she have time to do this? And as he gets to the kitchen and ends up approaching his wife, she turns around and he freaks the fuck out, because no longer is it his wife. Her face is that of a jack-o'-lantern, and she starts running towards him to attack him. The mother-in-law has an iconic line to the character where she's like, "You get a rock," and throws a rock at her to harass her. And this time she goes up to the husband and says in a very whispery, wraith-like voice, "You get a rock." And as she's going up to him, she's got saws in her hand, carving saws. She's got butcher knives, and she's going to carve herself another human jack-o'-lantern, this time on her abusive husband. So you get comeuppance. That's essentially the story. You guys weren't able to obviously read it, so I have to kind of give my breakdown of some of the things. I give it a 7.5 out of 10. It's a pretty good story. Is it great for current standards? No. It gets a little messy. It's kind of hard to keep track of what's really going on in the story, what's real, what's not. I pretty much just assume all of this is real because it seems to be that way. You don't get much explanation onto the great warped pumpkin figure, the vision, the field. What is this Sam Hain type of Halloween entity that infected her? Why did it just choose her? Can it choose other victims? You don't really know about that. As to what she kind of becomes and does, it's very much implied. It's not really flat out said. So that kind of detracts from it. And there was a lot of over description involving the old hag, the mother-in-law. Curran's known for his vivid descriptions to kind of paint details and pictures, but he kind of overdid it in this one a little bit, so that also detracts points. But it's a fun one. It felt like a mixture of Tales from the Dark Side and Tales from the Crypt. Essentially, where Tales from the Dark Side is that very, it felt like Halloween Candy, the episode, where it's got that Halloween vibe, it's got that empty house vibe. That sort of more supernatural, weird, mindfuckery kind of stuff is kind of in Tales from the Dark Side, where it's more weird stories. And Tales from the Crypt is in the fact that you got this abusive husband, you got human threats, and she gets comeuppance at the end, which is typically a Tales from the Crypt trope. And you also have the idea of the supernatural threats being in the story and then the human threats. And it's like, which do I root for? In this case, I was rooting for the supernatural threats because the human threats were bad. So you have that duality of villains and, who's really the villain. That's kind of what the story invokes. So yeah, it had vivid, absolutely beautiful descriptions of autumn and Halloween in it too. Really, really good. I hope he reprints this story at some point so many other people can read Pumpkin Witch at least. I feel like I say that all the time for Tim Curran. Just reprint all your stories because there's so many ones out there that I just want to read and enjoy. I've actually, just side note, I've been buying like old magazines and paperbacks from him just to get some of the unique stories that are in there. I've gotten like 7 or 8 of them. There's still 43 or 44 left that are just lost in time. And some of them end up being really kind of unique and fun and cool and good. So yeah, I hope he reprints this one out there. And most importantly, I hope he makes more of these type of Halloween stories, because with the way he wrote this one, you can tell he loves Halloween. And next one, this should be relatively short. This one's going to be Spider Wasp. So Spider Wasp, of course, comes from the book Brain Leeches and Other Phenomenon, which is a Lovecraftian-based short story collection. So it makes sense that this is going to be in there. I think this is a reprinted story. This story originally appeared in a book called, I think, What October Brings, which was a Halloween short story collection dedicated to Lovecraftian stuff. I should probably read that. It is October, spooky month, but that's the origin of the story. This one opens up with a man kind of on a mission, kind of a John Wick type of persona man who ends up going to this small Appalachian town up in the woods. I think that he nicknames Dead Possum or something, or Open Possum or something like that. And it's this small, what you essentially find out to be like cult-like town that celebrates Halloween, but it's more pagan. They call it the festival, and it's really to guarantee that they have successful harvests and other stuff up in the Appalachian region for their families and communities. And when he gets there, you notice some very strange stuff. Now, of course, they're celebrating Halloween, so you've got tons of autumn leaves all over the place. You have jack-o'-lanterns in the hundreds spread across town. You got people celebrating with like food and parades and apple cider. But they have a few strange things that you tend to notice because it gives off a cult-like vibe where there are no like middle-aged or young women there. All the women that he sees are either very, very old or extremely young kids. So there's no like middle-aged or younger women that are present at all throughout this festival, which definitely would raise eyebrows. And the same way that in Chinese festivals, they carry those super long traditional paper mache dragons and kind of parade them around. Here they're parading around a very eldritch monstrosity in paper mache form, which is this, what looks like to be cosmic eldritch insect with like dozens of legs and these membranous like flapping sheet-like wings, and it's got this head on a stalk and these bulbous eyes and these giant mandibles. It looks like a freaky mantis spider wasp kind of combination insect, but he knows it to be an entity or Lovecraftian deity that this town is supposed to be built on and that they worship. I think the name is Gothra. They worship the hell out of this entity and believe it to be the reason for the success of their harvest. And it has to be celebrated once every Halloween, October 31st that rolls around. And the reason why he's there is because him and his wife had ended up coming to this town, And due to their, cult-like nature and their preacher, his wife had ended up becoming indoctrinated into the town and their religion, and he ended up losing his wife forever. She ended up just going to here, becoming a part of their cult and their meetings, and she disappeared basically off the face of the earth. He was not able to find her. So now he's back in town. He has revenge. He's packing a revolver pistol in his jacket, and he's going to get ready to shoot the preacher and essentially ruin this pagan holiday for them. He's going to try to destroy their worship of this creature and kind of take down the town by cutting off the head of the serpent. If you cut off the head of the serpent, the body dies in a sense. And the head of the serpent is the preacher that took his wife and whatever entity they might worship. As he starts walking around, he meets an older woman figure who kind of foreshadows some things to him, kind of tells him to watch his back and kind of look out, just enjoy the holiday and move on. And he meets this younger girl figure. This young girl is very kind of strange, very kind of blank, which has seemed to be like a common theme amongst all these people. They're celebrating, but they're like dead inside. So that's, sort of there. And they're sort of dreamy. They're sort of veering off into space at something that he can't perceive, but essentially they can perceive. And he eventually questions her about the preacher, tries to get to the chase and figure out what he can do. And as he starts traveling to the town, eventually he finds the source of this Appalachian small town's religion, as well as the quote-unquote preacher. And it gets very crazy. It ends up getting quite, again, Lovecraftian. The stakes go from 0 to 100. You go from a small town celebrating Halloween to something much bigger and more dangerous and more freaky. That's essentially the story. I'd give this one somewhere around like an 8 out of 10 or 8.5 out of 10. Probably 8 out of 10. It's a good one. I enjoyed it. I like the Halloween atmosphere and the vibe. I like the sense that this guy has something taken from him, a very close loved one, and he's sort of a man on a mission trying to get revenge and sort of find out what's going on in the town. He's a little bit kind of checking out the town. He's been there before, but he's trying to find out, the head of the serpent. He has to cut it off and try to take them down that way as revenge and get back his wife. That's what he's hoping as like a reward for this. And things obviously don't go that way. I really like the imagery of, the idea that they're carrying around like a paper mache, like a paper mache version of the entity that they kind of worship, the villain in a sense. Because usually when it comes to horror stories or even Tim Curran stories, it takes a while to kind of at least see the villain. You don't really know what's going to be the villain until the end, and that's sort of the point, or like middle section end. Here you just kind of see it up front, and they're sort of proudly celebrating it in that Chinese dragon style. So I thought that was interesting for a Lovecraftian story. The villain's very terrifying. Once you see it, it's, scary if you don't like bugs. Just be prepared. Quite sinister. And the scheme that's going on is quite interesting. And there's a part where you enter into the climax, and the entry into the climax is very cool and very sort of wild. So that's my review of Tim Curran's 2 Halloween stories. If you guys want to go check out the Spider Wasp one and figure out what happens, you can go to Brain Leeches and Other Phenomenon. Pumpkin Witch, unfortunately, you guys probably won't be able to read it unless you go searching for it. But hopefully he reprints it in the future. And I hope he does more Halloween stories. These 2, while they were good, or pretty good, I felt like they were kind of lackluster in terms of I wanted something like really stand out and great from him involving Halloween. I've praised this guy to death. He's done a lot of fantastic, amazing stories. He gives me exactly what I want in horror, which is a lot of horror action, absolutely badass, horrifying, aura-farming monsters and villains, very creative, and great descriptions of settings and stuff. But he didn't really deliver too much in terms of these Halloween ones, so hopefully in the future he tries another stab at it, quote unquote. And that's all I got for today. So if you guys like this quick review, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, comment down below your thoughts and opinions. And next video is going to actually be a kids horror book, one that I reread after a while because I forgot a lot about it on my past read. But I reread it now, and I'm willing to talk about it. So that's going to be, for the next video, Goosebumps Werewolf Skin, a Halloween setting werewolf story, and a quite unique one, even just by horror standards. I mean, it does something quite unique compared to many other werewolf horror stories out there. So it should be fun to talk about. Stay tuned for that one. And I hope you guys enjoyed this attraction of the Horrorweentown Festival. Next time we're going to be going off to Werewolf Woods and taking a look at werewolf skin. Until next time, deuces. And grab some cotton candy on the way.